now before I get into the chunk of the lecture. So I'm going to start recording. And I also just posted last week's. These Zoom videos are so long that I don't wait for them to finish processing. I just leave and then the next day. And so I forgot to do it the next day. Last week was super busy on Friday for me. And then I went to do it yesterday. Star reminded me, and I had something else uploading for a client, and I just got last week's uploaded today. If you felt like you needed extra support, again, don't feel, is the discussion board open until the end of the day? I think I set it for midnight. Let me check that for you all right now. Oh, a lot of you did it. I see there's 12 now. So let's see, I have to leave student view for a second. Let me check the time. I did set it till midnight today, 11:59. So you can do
Thank you.
You're welcome.
I just noticed that my participation grade had like dropped a big amount, and then I was like, oh my God, what happened? And then I realized like, oh, it was that.
Yeah, so I started keeping that up to date just to remind you. So you don't have to panic. There'll be opportunities to make it up, or you can always go back like right now and I'll go fix it, but it's a good way to remind you to do those things. So I've just started keeping it up to date. And like I said, I will give you opportunities like for the discussion board this week. If you need to make up a point for a participation point for when you're gone, you can do the extended version of this discussion board. And if you just want to do it so you have it on deck, like if you know you're going to miss a day, you can do that as well. Okay, so now that I'm recording, I'm going to jump into the lecture. We've got one PowerPoint that is very dry. So I'm going to skim through this pretty fast. This is another PowerPoint that comes directly from Adobe, and it has some really good content, and you can also download it and read through it. But again, it's very dry. It's not, the graphics aren't super inspiring, but let me just go over some of the things that it has on here. Let me move you all to a good spot so I can read. Okay, so goals of typographic design. Typography plays an important role in how audiences perceive your document and its information. Good design is about capturing your audience's interest and helping your audience gather information quickly and accurately. Typography creates relationships between different types of information, both organizing this information and keeping it interesting. So sometimes typography should be really simple and to the point, and sometimes you have room to really make that like the main focus of the design. But it's all about hierarchy and moving people's eye through your design work. Okay, so design principles for typography. Legibility. Obviously, if people cannot read what you want them to read, it's not as an effective design. You will see there are some examples where it is harder to read, but it's like a very artistic choice. But bottom line is, if you're doing something that's communicating something very important, and the point of this is to get people to read, make sure they can read it. And you do that by size, color, font choice, and all of those types of things. Similarity and alignment, using typography to create relationships between similar kinds of information. Uniformity and consistency, repeating familiar elements to focus on your audience's attention. If you open a novel, there's not a different font on every page. There's usually one font, and occasionally you get like fun fonts sprinkled in. I've seen novels make artistic choices, like if people are talking, or there's usually like the title, but the bulk of those paragraphs in a novel that you're reading will all have the same font. It doesn't jump around and change randomly from page to page. And contrast, creating interest and distinguishing different types of information within different typefaces. One element of contrast is a hierarchy, making sure the audience understands that information has different levels of importance. Again, that word hierarchy that you'll hear me talk about all the time. So legibility, font family, font size, letter, word, and line spacing and alignment. And I also mentioned color earlier. I will add that again. The color that you choose to put type in can definitely affect how it's read. Legibility and font families. So online and print might have different choices that you'll want to make. So you'll hear us talk about serif and sans serif. So serifs create distinctions between characters upper and lower. So there's these little slabs on the ends of the letters. And then a sans serif is like this, where it doesn't have those at the ends. Stroke is the thickness, and then line. So in print, it helps the reader follow text easily, a serif, but online it can sometimes appear blurry. So this is, again, you can download this PowerPoint and you can go back and read and kind of study the different things. And then there's also a ton of links for you in the module to start understanding when to use what font for what thing. Legibility and body text size. Legibility of body text varies for different audiences. Younger audiences may be able to read fonts sized 8 or 9 points. Older audiences may be able to read font size around 10 points or above. Font size above 14 point breaks down the continuity of the text, making text appear too gray. So 10 is pretty much my default when I'm starting a document that has chunks of paragraphs and lots of type. That will usually be 10 point for me. If I know it's going to an audience that might need a larger typeface, 12. When you open a Word document, I think 12 is the default for Word. But in design, it can look a little too big and clunky. So 10 is probably my average body copy typeface. And when you hear me say body copy versus headline, that means it's the bulk of the text, like the large paragraphs of text. Legibility and spacing. If letters, words, or lines are too close together, readers have a hard time because text blocks tend to look too dark. If letters, words, or lines are too far apart, readers have a hard time because blocks of text tend to look too light, causing readers to lose a sense of continuity. Spacing between words needs to be consistent to promote legibility. Too much variation leads to eye strain. So legibility and alignment, you'll see left aligned text is most legible because spacing between words is uniform. Justified text is also legible, though less so with shorter line lengths because it tends to create uneven spaces. So lots of people like the look of justified type because it gives you, sorry about that. It gives you like a solid chunk, like another object to really like move around and with symmetry and things like that. But you could get these rivers among it, and that really breaks up the flow of what you're trying to read. So center aligned and right aligned text is generally harder to read because your reader's eye are used to following text from left to right. I mean, honestly, I don't have a lot of trouble following centered text because you just go down, but we are most used to starting from left to right. That's how we read. But there's also some good aesthetic uses for right aligned text too. And again, everything is your choice, and you have to make decisions based on what you're working with and what the purpose of your design is. So font families and audience. Each font family has a different personality. Use different font families to evoke tone and mood. An advertisement for a school, for example, might use an elegant font such as Garamond. An advertisement for a financial firm, on the other hand, might use a more modern font such as Franklin Gothic. So I'm not sure I would call this modern and this elegant. There's so many font choices, but those are some good standard examples. See, did I skip too far? Okay. I told you guys, I'm never going to learn how to click through PowerPoint. You're going to have to deal with this all semester. So for body text, you might want to use something fairly conventional and legible. For headings, consider audience. Teenagers respond to fonts than business people. This is all basic information. People are going to respond to fonts differently, so you need to choose them based on who your target audience is. And you want to support the subject matter and deliberately use a contrasting font to create interest. So typically you'll have like a body copy font that is fairly simple and easy to read, and then you'll have a fancier or more fun headline font that can add some personality. Just depends on what you're designing with. And I will talk about font pairings as we get further into this. So aligned text creates alignment in your design, such lines help readers draw connections between different parts of the document. So this is the headline, this would be a subheadline, and then extra writing here, and the way these things are all put in space. So think about now, as we're laying out text and designing, it's just like the assignment last week, only these text blocks are the objects that you're trying to create symmetry or negative space and balance and all of those things in between. Uniformity and font families. To maintain overall uniformity, limit the number of font families per page to 1 or 2. Use the same font for headings and body text to produce a uniform look. This is known as a concordance. So again, it's all subject to change based on what your purpose is and what you're designing, but typically 2 fonts, a headline and a body copy font is pretty safe. The more fonts you start to use, the more you need to really understand why you're making those choices and how they work together. Contrast in font families. Using the same font family throughout creates a uniformity, but may make a document seem flat or uninteresting. You can add interest by contrasting this display type and the body type. So here we go. To create contrast, you would use 2 font families, one serif and one sans serif. So this is a sans serif thick, bold headline, and then a serif subheadings. Conflict in font families. To avoid conflict, many designers avoid using 2 font families of the same type variety, such as 2 serif fonts. So it'd be like you're making choices and you're switching. So this is Palatino and this is Georgia. They're both serif fonts, but they're different fonts. So it looks a little bit off, is what this slide is kind of saying. So contrast and tracking. Tracking refers to the space between all of the letters in a line. Font families have built-in tracking that work well for body text. For headings, you can change your tracking to contrast. So a technique I like to use a lot, especially for subheadlines, is to use a sans serif font and then just increase the tracking to add more space. And I feel like when I'm doing logos and they have like a tag, it kind of makes it look real modern and sophisticated. And when we do the assignment, you'll see that sometimes the tracking, especially in script fonts, comes in a little weird, and then you can kern and adjust those yourself. Contrast and baseline shift. So designers shift baseline to create interest. So dropping the first letter adds a playful look. Moving other letters around creates a jittery effect. So, you know, there's a time and a place for everything. This is just basically showing you that you don't have to stick to the default baseline when it comes to working with type. Use typography to guide readers through the levels of your document. Hierarchy. I say this all the time. I'm going to say this every week probably. Think about the hierarchy and what you want people to see first and how you want their eye to move through your documents. And there's no difference when it comes to like your posters from last week or a layout for a magazine. Hierarchy and typography. Hierarchy helps your audience distinguish between levels of information such as heading versus body copy. Many documents are divided into hierarchical sections. So main title section, subsection, or a book has chapters and headlines. Example of hierarchy. Top level headings can use unconventional fonts. Different levels use font families and font coloring and leading. And these headlines look the same because they express the same level of hierarchy. So you'll repeat certain things. Sorry about that. So these are repeated throughout the document, and this would be just for special uses. So in summary, typography can play a key role in design. Good typography starts with a font family. Choose these to meet your design goals and use text alignment to create relationships between different kinds of information. So that's the gist of this. It is, again, that was fairly dry, but the information there is good and it will help you start to learn about the vocabulary. You can download that and you can read it again. Any questions about any of that before I move on? Okay.
Nope.
So close that one. My next PowerPoint I think is a lot more fun and hopefully inspiring. But let me just move. Just check in the chat. Okay. Let me move over to, here we go. So I talked about kerning a little bit in that last PowerPoint. So tracking is the space between the letters, and we'll do the assignment and you can play with some of those font settings. And I have things listed here like kerning, leading, and tracking. Kerning is the space between the letters and adjusting that. Tracking is changing the space like uniformly over the whole word. And then leading is the space between the lines. So there is a link here, and this is really fun if any of you want to do it. And you can actually practice your kerning. And I will show you in the assignment today how to actually kern for the assignment in Illustrator. But kerning just means making sure that space is harmonious between a whole word. So when you just type a word straight up, a lot of times it doesn't have a perfect kern on it. And that is because the way the computer works is each letter, you see in the chat. Oh, so kerning, leading, and tracking. So tracking is changing the space. Let me jump over to Illustrator for a second. And we're going to switch out this font. So if I'm coming over here, you can probably see my full screen, but you're in the way. Let me move you here. So you'll see in the paragraph and the character styles, this right here is the space between the letters if I had like a full paragraph. So if I got my type tool, I just went like that, it makes a whole paragraph. Now leading is adjusting this so there's more space between those lines. Tracking is adjusting the space of just a couple words so there's more space between each letter. And then kerning is what you actually do when you manually adjust that space, because you type a word and it'll come in. And so fonts are created because each letter has its own little designated space. So the computer knows that this is a letter and this is a letter and this is a letter. Oops. And each letter is given its own space, but sometimes, especially with script fonts and things like that, they don't line up quite perfectly. So designers go in and adjust that kerning. And that is actually your assignment lesson today. We'll do that together. So I'm going to leave this for right now. And you can practice kerning on this website. And it's just fun because you can move. So the A, the last letter and the first letter are fixed. And you'll just move these and just try to visually align, like to get these spaces between these letters even. It's actually it's pretty tricky. If I could sit here and fuss over this, but I'm just going to say, okay, that's done. And then it tells you how well you did. See, so you come over here, and I should have actually had things moved that way a little bit. Same here. Things like O's and S's can be really tricky, especially when paired with things like I's, because I's don't take up a lot of visual weight, but then the O's and the S's have these big round spaces. And especially on S's, things like that create like visual negative space. So you just kind of adjust. So this is just a fun exercise you can all practice with. And then sometimes it's easier to, oops, it won't let me right now. I should have done that at the beginning. Oh, here, let me try this. To zoom out, I think, on a website like this. Oh, it clicked it. Because you can see more of it at once. It comes in pretty big and it can, you want to see this as one whole visual chunk. So moving forward, let me do my second PowerPoint and then we'll do some exercises together. So I used to play this video and it was a video about Comic Sans and it was really old, and the designer talking in the video had, he looked like every designer I've ever met that's not me. And he's like bald and has glasses. And it's a great video. I can still share the link if any of you are interested, but it's such an old video now. And I was like, okay, this video is too old. It's outdated. I was going to remake it. I didn't have time to remake it. So I just turned it into a PowerPoint and took the message of that video and put it into this PowerPoint to share with you all. And the point I want to get across is that there are really no bad fonts. It's up to us as the designer to use fonts properly. So fonts communicate not just with the written word, but with their form and shape. These shapes are visual cues that add an extra layer of communication. So fonts have feelings, they have moods, they have purposes. It's not just typing letter forms. It's so much more about the shapes and everything about these fonts that's adding that communication level to it. So some fonts convey emotion or meaning all on their own. So if you look here between Angry Birds and Road Rage, these are the names of the fonts versus the KG Happy and Happy Kids. They just, sorry. They have such different visual cues. They're telling you different things just instinctually based on the letter forms alone. Do you all see that? See how it's like Angry Birds is a really great font for this brand because it does have, it feels angry when you look at it. The same with the Road Rage font versus the Happy Kids font. And those are being communicated through their shapes and the way the letter forms are created. Now, some have distinctive associations or connections. Do y'all know what this type style is from?
Star Wars?
Yep. Yeah. And so Star Wars has made this so iconic that you see this, and it's even used in parodies now. But if you see this, you know this is Star Wars. You're about to watch a Star Wars movie. So fonts can become so connected to outside meaning that they have, a communication level all their own. And then sometimes all you want a font to do is work harmoniously with your design. You don't want it to stand out at all. You just want that font to feel like it fits with what you're creating. The reason some fonts get a bad reputation is because we use them wrong. It's not because fonts are bad. It's because they might be used for things that they were never intended to. So we'll do more on this in a minute. First, we're going to start off with some font vocabulary. So most font vocabulary in typography originates from the printing press. So the printing press is what started this whole thing. It's why we're sitting down at these computers and why we communicate the way we do. It's because of the invention of the printing press, and it completely changed the way we now use the written word. So the printing press, so letters were created from casting metal at a foundry. So when there was a printing press, these letters would actually be placed individually, and they were little metal letters, or sometimes probably big metal letters. And you can see here in this illustration, oops. And a foundry, so it comes from the French word fondue, to melt, and that is why foundry is the word for font. So it's really funny. Font vocabulary is not like, it's not that deep. It just comes from where whatever this was used for or what it came from. So most typography vocabulary originates from the wonderful invention of the printing press when letters were created from casting metal at a foundry. And that's where the word font comes from. So font comes from foundry. And oh, that was my note. I made this today. Sorry. Graphic showing that. And then this is the graphic I made. So individual letters, these individual letters were kept in cases and stored in the uppercase and the lowercase. So literally we have a uppercase because it was stored in the uppercase. We have a lowercase because they stored it in the lowercase. And then there, this is, sorry, there we go. My little people keeps getting in my way. So typeface. A typeface is a group of glyphs, letters, and numerals that share a common design and a collection of characters within a typeface is called a font. So for example, Helvetica is a typeface, and there are various fonts within that typeface, such as condensed, bold, thin, etc. I forgot to take my notes out of this. You're all, just bear with me here. Let's see. Okay, so italics. Other vocabulary words with similar origin stories include words like italics, which was created by typesetters in Italy. That is why we call it italics, and not just because it means slanted. So you'd assume that italics meant that it was slanted or had something to do with the way these letter forms look. It was created in Italy. Venice, someone realized, and I forgot the name of this person, that you could fit a lot more words on a page if you slanted them and put them together, and then italics was created. So now we're going to jump back to the bad font situation. One of the notoriously bad fonts is Comic Sans. So Comic Sans is hated. If you start getting into the world of graphic design, there are jokes about it. And people love to hate this font. The origin of Comic Sans. So Comic Sans was created in 1994, and it was derived from hand-lettered comic books. So hence the name Comic Sans, it came from comic books. It was originally intended to be used for the word bubbles of a cartoon dog in an early version of Windows interface. So when these computers, like when people first started using computers, it's probably, if some of you are on the younger end, it might be funny to even imagine a world without computers or people not having computers in their hands or their homes. But when computers were first becoming more common, like personal computers, you didn't have a user interface. You had to know like what to type in. I'm trying to think. If you've ever seen, you probably won't know these old references, but the beginning of Doogie Howser, he's writing on his diary on his computer and it looks really old school. So maybe just YouTube like Doogie Howser intro. And there's another movie I'm trying to think of from the 80s where you can see like someone typing on a computer. I can't think of it, but I'll try to think of another reference. But then, companies like Microsoft and Apple realized there needs to be an interface for people to be able to move around these systems and utilize it. And so one of those was this cartoon dog that would talk to you. It's kind of like the clipboard that's in Word as well. And they ended up not using this font for the dog, but they put this font in the menu choices of fonts on Microsoft. So while it didn't make the cut, it did get added to the font choice within Microsoft software. This gave millions of people access to it, and this gave people the freedom to choose it for all of their design needs, whether it was appropriate or not. So here are some examples. These are real life examples of people choosing Comic Sans for things where it is not an appropriate choice. I pulled these off the internet, and it's things like making a difference on a police officer car, or just using it for like a big icon in your city, or this is a Canadian quarter. So Comic Sans is not always the best choice, but when people had the ability to choose whatever they wanted, these people are not designers, and some of them chose Comic Sans. So this is how poor Comic Sans became one of the most hated fonts of all time, but it was never intended to be used in so many ways by anyone who had access to a computer. So Comic Sans was not intended to be used like this, but the people who now could use computers are not designers. So they're just picking what they wanted to use without giving it much thought. And this is the habit that I want all of you to break now that you're in a design class and you're learning how to make conscious decisions about your design. So redeemable qualities. Every font has a purpose and a use. So like I said, there are no bad fonts. There's always going to be a purpose for something, and the best designers can make any font work well with what they're trying to communicate. So Comic Sans is known to be a dyslexia-friendly font because of the letters appear less crowded and have easily distinguishable characteristics. So I want you to think about this when choosing fonts. The accessibility factor is very important to your audience. And you don't have to choose Comic Sans, but if you understand why Comic Sans is known to be dyslexia-friendly, you can make other choices that have these similar characteristics. So the letter forms are really, there's lots of space between them so they don't get clustered and you can see each individual letter. And then each character is easily distinguishable. I have a 5-year-old daughter. She's just learning how to read, and she gets so confused if she sees a typeface that has an A written differently than like how they learn to write their A's. And so she would be confused by this, the way this A character is, and she gets very confused by that versus something that looks like this one right here. And that's the font, that's a font that looks like how she writes it. And then I added this graphic here. If any of you are into the world of children's picture books, this is a beautiful book, and it is all written in a font that's dyslexia friendly. So you can see the comparison here between this font and Comic Sans. Dyslexia friendly down here is actually written in the typeface Comic Sans. You'll see things like, sorry, the way the little tails on the ends of the letters curve to show, to help distinguish those. It's not the same as a serif, but it does help distinguish each letter. There's lots of space in between those, and the A's have the same big round written A versus something like this with the extra tail on it. And this book is really beautiful. It's about this Aaron Slater illustrator, and he is dyslexic and doesn't really understand why he can't tell his stories and read the same way. And they put the whole book in this font. So if you want to read a wonderful children's book, you can look that up. But it's a really good example. I want you to see the font here and compare it to Comic Sans here. So now we're going to talk about a font called Trajan. And I have a link to a really good article where you can watch a whole video about this. And I say that like you're super lucky and you're excited about it, but it is really good. So Comic Sans certainly is not a perfectly designed or balanced font. But again, this is not why we hate it. The same fate was bestowed upon its precisely designed predecessor, Trajan. And I like to compare these two fonts because Comic Sans is a little rough. It's not harmonious. It's a little jagged. It doesn't look perfect. Trajan is very precisely and it's designed super precise. It's to mimic the Roman column writing that is on a Roman building that I forgot the name of. Probably Trajan's column. That's where it comes from. And it was designed in 1989 for Adobe. So this isn't the same as just a comic Microsoft font. This was designed for Adobe. And really, when you look at these letter forms, they're very beautiful. They have a lot of harmony between them. And it is a really nice font. But because it was put on Adobe software in 1989, the creators of the software this was the creators of the software that used to make professional graphics, like movie posters. So because now a bunch of professional designers had access to this font, it became the default movie poster font, and you will start noticing it on so many movies of all different kinds. So I like to compare that to Comic Sans, because this also made a font cliche and like made fun of. And we, the professionals, did this to this font. It wasn't the novices with access to it. The professionals continually made this choice. And if you watch that video, they will show you all the posters. So Trajan's downfall. Starting in 1992, Trajan was popping up on movie posters everywhere. It was originally associated with epic blockbusters, and it became the default choice. So this overuse eventually changed the quality of movies using Trajan, and Trajan is now considered cliche and overused. So you'll see it on things like something like Titanic, but then now if you see Trajan, it's mostly associated with B movies, direct to video. Lots and lots of horror movies love to use Trajan, and it's just completely changed the way we think about this font. So social connotations are also really important when considering font choices. So Comic Sans versus Trajan, the point of this whole thing, a font, no matter how well it is designed, will be considered a poor choice if the subconscious meaning of its letter forms does not align with what it is intended to communicate. So I know that was a lot to say, but again, so a font is a poor choice no matter what if the subconscious meaning of its letter forms, like the shape, the feel, the social connotations, doesn't align with what you are trying to say. Those have to match, and then it's a great choice. So if you're trying to make something silly and funny, Comic Sans might be a great choice. If you are designing a cheesy horror movie poster, then yeah, use Trajan, because it will automatically denote those things to your audience. It is difficult for Comic Sans and Trajan to overcome their notorious reputations, because by now we all have these associations with them. But this is proof that even novice designer understands that typography is more than just words. So the fact that people make jokes about Comic Sans and Trajan shows you that fonts and typography isn't just what we see. There's all of this subconscious meaning to it. And now with that, I just have some pages of type inspiration to get you all excited about this week and get excited about what we're going to create. I just think this is a really beautiful poster. Let's talk type, let type talk. So your font choices, your typography will speak volumes when you start learning how to really harness the power of it. This is another really great design. And then I thought this just shows the way you can create a hierarchy and break up fonts and start getting really into like some fun type treatments and doing things that are really unique. Now, this is a really cool example. This isn't quite what we're doing this week. This would be an advanced level of this assignment. So I don't think any of you are quite here yet, but if somebody wants to tackle an advanced version of what we'll be doing, I can show you how to do something like this. But I saw these and I thought, oh, these are really cool. This would make such a cool assignment, and I could teach you all how to do this, but it's a pretty advanced level. So we're not going to quite go there unless some of you ask for that information and want to know. But I just wanted to inspire you and get you used to seeing how type can be really used in artistic ways and fun, creative ways. This is a lot more like what our assignment will be this week. These are pretty cool versions and still very advanced because the form and the shape of these letters are being used to create depth and repetition and gradient almost effect, because they'll be more congested in certain areas and then fade off. So this would be like an advanced level of what we'll be doing this week. And I have lots of student examples to show you as well. So that is, oops, sorry. There. So that is my typography lecture. The dry, boring stuff, and then the fun, interesting stuff. I get really into the psychology or just like the thought processes behind what people are perceiving when they look at your designs. So we can get into like the hardcore vocabulary a lot and learn, we need to know what leading is. We need to know what tracking is. But I think it's so much more interesting to know why you made that font choice, why it connects with what you're trying to communicate, and how you're pairing things together to create a message of something. Let's see. So Star said, now I can tell how it looks kind of tacky or childish in a way. Were you talking about Comic Sans?
Yeah, when you were showing the pictures like of the water thing and stuff, it was that part with those pictures.
Yeah, so I mean, on its own, it's really not bad, and if you're using it for its intended purpose, it's fine. My husband actually liked using it all the time. Like, we've known each other for a long time, so his AOL like chat used to always be in Comic Sans, and he likes that font. And even today, he's like, "Oh, I like it." I'm sure if he had the ability to switch his iPhone to that font, he would. And I'm glad he doesn't have that choice. But when you start seeing it misused or overused, you start seeing like, this isn't really a good fit for all situations. The same with Trajan. Overuse is detrimental to probably anything. Like, even like with trends and things like that, when you start seeing something too much, we tend to shun it and go a different way. So let's see here. There are a couple more links. Let me go to the module really quick. Sorry, hold on, I lost it. I think I closed it. Okay. Bounce back to screen sharing. So I have here a definition: font pairing. Know which fonts work well together and why. Contrast and balance. You can find resources to help you on Pinterest and Google font pairing and selecting the fonts to understand that fonts have personalities and convey different moods. Knowing how to adjust and manipulate type. So that's what we're going to do in our assignment. But font pairing, and I will tell you this too when we get into color theory and choosing color palettes, you don't have to know what works well together right now. In fact, I don't expect you just to know right off the bat. But if you do things like, if you go to Pinterest and you type in, just like I said, you type in font pairing, you can find resources. They will pair fonts for you. And the more you utilize these tools, and it can seem like a crutch, but the more you see what works well together, the more you'll be able to do it on your own. So feel free to use tools. I don't think it's, it's not bad to have to lean on these resources. It's only going to make you stronger because you'll see more things. And just type font pairing into Pinterest and you'll get a bunch of graphics like this, and you can do the same thing in Google, and it'll really help you start seeing how things fit together, and then you can start making those choices on your own. And it's really like things like this, like pairing serif with sans serif, pairing script fonts, and that's more vocabulary that you'll hear me say. So I think it's down here. Oh, I don't actually have that written out. But if I bounce over to Illustrator, you'll see in my character palette, I can filter my fonts based on characteristics and the classification. So you'll hear me say things like script, which means it's script like cursive, handwritten. And then so script and handwritten are technically different. Handwritten is something like Comic Sans or like a comic book style font. A script font is like the flowing calligraphy. And then slab serif is like a serif, but they're like chunky slabs on the ends. And then Serif has those slabs, but they're usually connected by some kind of curve. So feel free to utilize these filters as well. It'll really start helping you understand. And then I also have a link to this short course in typography. And this is just a really good poster that'll help get you some of those vocabulary words in your head with good examples to pair them with. So old style, you'll see things like slanted serifs, like I just mentioned, slab serif here. Let me zoom in. So you'll see here, this slab serif is a big chunk at the end versus this old style where it's curved. And then sans serif doesn't have anything. And then the script is the cursive, and a display font is something that's very artistic and decorative. So you'll hear people say, oh, that's a display font. This is a body font. This is a subheadline font. And then it even gives you some examples. So this is also in the module. It'll be fun for you to look at and review if you just want to get more of that vocabulary in your head. And then we'll go over how to adjust and manipulate type. This is the link to that Trajan video. And this video is really good. I think it's really entertaining and it's fun to read, and it's fun to see all the different movie posters and just these like this group thinking and like cultural phenomenon of something like that getting so popular is really interesting to me. So I think that would be a fun read for you all. Accessible typefaces, I talked a little bit about that in the PowerPoint, but this will dive into that even more. So if that is an area of interest, I get quite a few liberal studies majors in here. So if you're getting into a career like education or teaching in some way, you'll definitely be making graphics to teach your students things, and you might want to learn about what is easier for them to read and what typefaces feel more accessible than other ones. Typographic characters, this is just another cheat sheet to help you start understanding the different characters in a typeface. A lot of times too, you'll see things like the quotes being misused, like curly quotes versus tick marks, which are just look like this, and the curly quotes actually curl like here. So there's a lot of resources. This is like a resource heavy week. And so your assignment, I think, is really fun and creative to kind of balance out all of that heavy vocabulary and just getting all of that new information in your brain. So if I hop over to the assignment, I will go over that briefly, but there is a video guiding you through it in detail. And then we'll do the assignment together. So project 2 is called Typeface. And what you're actually going to do is create something like this, and you're going to be making a face out of pieces of type. So these are actual student examples. And remember, it looks very similar to that example in the PowerPoint that I showed you, where you'll be using letter forms to create these faces. And the point of this is to just start understanding the different shapes and the way letters can change between fonts and typefaces. So description, there are thousands of typefaces, some great, some not so great. One of the most important aspects in understanding the selection and integration of letter forms or type styles is just looking at the different font families. So for this project, you're creating a character face using only letter forms and bits and pieces of individual typefaces. The objective is to explore and understand the changing character and dynamics of various typefaces and their associated letter forms. So I want you to start in a sketchbook. I want you to, cool, sorry. Anytime I see something in the chat, I'll go check it, make sure someone doesn't have a question that I'm glazing over. So I want you to start in your sketchbook and just maybe just come up with some silly faces, whether it's like super detailed or not, but that'll help you guide you so you don't just open up Illustrator and like, I don't know what to do. So I'll walk you through some tips and tricks. And again, there is a video here and this video will take you through it in much more detail, but the skills you'll need. So you need to know how to convert type to outlines. You want to explore the Glyphs palette, explore a variety of typefaces, determine what best will meet your needs. So if you've sketched out something that looks like this cute face with the beret and it's got all these curvy lines, you probably aren't going to go look for a chunky, bold font. You're going to look for something that has a lot of curves and shapes to it. And then like lots of these, so it just has to be a face, but sometimes students get really creative and add more parts to it. So it's totally up to you and what you want to achieve. And then, so outline fonts, group and ungroup objects, release compound paths, and using scissors and cutting tools. So I'm going to go over that in Illustrator. If you would like to open Illustrator and follow along with me, I'll show you a few things. And this is just some tips and tricks to help get you started with the project. And then we can have a quick break and then we'll do the assignment together, which is very easy. And you can just get it done tonight and be done with it. But it, again, has typography skills that I want you all to learn. So you can start by just clicking your type tool in Illustrator and it will put some lorem ipsum there for you. And if you would like, you can type a word. And then if you do not have your properties set, I like to keep my properties here so that if I'm clicking on my type, I have my character palette right here. But if you don't have your character palette open, Window, Type, Character. And then it will open this floating palette for you. But as you can see, I'm a messy designer and I keep all these palettes floating around on my artboard all over the place anyway. So I really just use my properties palette when I want to find my character styles. Another one I'm going to open, which I'll close a few of these that'll be in the way, is the Glyphs palette. So Window, Type, Glyphs. And what this does, this is showing you every character that is in this font. So right now I just have it set at the default font. I can pick any of these fonts and change it, and it will change the Glyphs palette to show me every character that's available to me in that font. So keep that in mind as you're working on these typefaces. You can use any of the characters that are available to you. You can use multiple fonts. You'll see here on the assignment, you just have to tell me and list out what you use. I want to know what the actual font was and what the character was. It's okay if you manipulate it. It's okay if it becomes something that's so far from what you originally used. This is where you have that creative freedom. But I want to know where it was originally sourced from. So it's 2 pages you're turning in, your actual face, and then a list of what characters that you used. So depending on your font choice, this will change. And you can find different characters and shapes. Now, something that will be really useful to you, you can click on this palette and just start scrolling and being like, oh, look, a double O, that might come in handy. And then you can cut it and paste it. If you want to add something like this in here onto your artboard, you have to be clicked in this type somewhere and then just double click what you want and it'll add it. So if I want to start new, because that's going to add it to the current word that I had, I just click this and then I double click whatever letter form I want and it just adds that in there for me. You see how that's working? So that could be a little tricky. You might feel like you could drag these over, but you can't. You have to have your type tool and it has to be on the blinking type tool cursor. And then when you want to grab something from this palette, you double click it and it will add it to your type. And then you can take this and you can cut these out move them around, enlarge them, whatever you want to do. So the next thing I'm going to show you, and again, these things will be in that video as well, but I just want to make sure I give you a rundown of how to do these things today. The next thing you'll want to do is outline this type. So right now, this is typable. That means I can come in, I can edit it, I can add letters, I can change it up, and it's still workable type. But I just want to see these letter forms as shapes. And I might want to cut something up or adjust it. So I'm going to convert this font to outlines, and that is up in type, create outlines. And now you'll see, I should have zoomed in. Let me undo. Right now, this is type. If I go up to type, create outlines, it has converted that type to a shape. And it is now made up of points that I can move, manipulate, or cut. So let's see. I am actually going to do this with a much simpler font just to make it easier to follow along. This handwritten font, let me go back here. It's a very complex font made up of lots of different shapes. So when I start cutting this up, it could get a little hard to follow. I'll just show you. So you use a scissor tool. There's also a knife and eraser. So if I just take this knife and I slice this up, and then I take my direct selection arrow and I click on this to delete that, I still have all of this stuff over here and I have to come in and select it and grab it. And there's just going to be a lot of little things that I have to go in and delete because this is such a complex font. If I use something like this font and say I like the shape of this C, or let me look in here. Maybe this, some of these symbols I'm actually not, you may not even know what these symbols mean, but if you see a shape that you like, you can use it. So let me just grab this and say, I think like, oh, I like that curve. It would make maybe a good nose for my character that I sketched out. But I don't want it to quite look like that. So I'm going to type, create outlines. Oops, I didn't have it selected with my selection arrow. Type, create outlines. Now it's outlined. And then this, if I take this and I slice it with this knife and just slice it right here, now I can take the direct selection arrow, click it, and it cleanly deletes. So you could also do things like take the scissor tool, and the scissor tool works a little differently. When you're using the scissor tool, you again have to have your object selected, and you have to click both points. Like say I want to cut this here, so I just clipped it, but I also want to cut it. Oops, see, I didn't click the right part, so it gave me this warning. That's all that means. Don't let it freak you out or make you panic. It just means I didn't click on something that I could actually cut. But I wanted to cut here. So there, I just made that cut. If I get my direct selection arrow and click on it, I made a cut here and I made a cut here. I'm just clicking on this portion and deleting it, and see how it made that diagonal line. But this is actually open now. So if I were to change the fill to just a stroke, you'll see that that cut I made left the shape open. And if I want it closed, I actually have to go back and close that shape. Versus if I undo, using something like the knife tool, where you're actually slicing this thing right in half. And then that closes the shape automatically for you. So you can just experiment with these cutting tools and see what you want to do depending on what your design is and how it functions properly for you. But say I've got this shape, and then I'm going to add this in with some eyes. So I've got an eye and a nose going. And then maybe I want something that's like a smile or a mouth, and I'm not quite sure. So I'm going to click here. Don't want this font. Let's see. What do I think would work? Maybe I'll try this font and I'll look. Oh, let's use this letter. Then I can scale it up and then I can turn it. And again, I'm going to create outlines. So another thing you want to keep in mind, if you're using these letter forms in their pure form and you're not going to cut them up and move them around and adjust them, you can leave them as type. But what's going to start happening as you get your design layered, it's going to be much harder to grab these things when they're type, because some fonts, a good example, I think this one does it. Some fonts have their baselines in weird places. I'm trying to find one. Oh, here's a good example. So this font's baseline's right here. So if I tried to click it, I'm gonna have a hard time finding it. And it's just easier if this is type, create outlines, and then when I click it to move it, I just grab that object and it actually moves for me. So these will just be black and white. You do not have to add color to these. I want the shading and the depth to be created in the way you layer your letter forms. Does that make sense? Like if I go back to the PowerPoint, I have those images, but let's see if I go back here. So see how this is creating, there's like some depth here, but it's consisting of where things are put close together or far apart. So you don't need to use the gradients or shade this, just use black and white, use typography, and then create your depth by how you're layering your letter forms. So remember, texture, repetition, those types of things. And there is a video, again, there's a video here for you to follow. So that's what you're going to be doing for the assignment. It used to be fun too. These are printed out assignments. I had everyone print them out and mount them on foam core. And then this student actually went above and beyond and actually cut out the whole shape of his typeface. But these are some really good examples. They're really fun. You can see the range. There's a lot of creativity. And like I said, start in your sketchbook and give yourself a guide. But also, if you just want to start pulling fonts and shapes and kind of seeing how your creative juices flow, you can do it that way too. This is very open creatively. And anytime it's a project, I am giving you specifications. But like with that student that decided, hey, I'm going to cut out my my printed project, that was a risky move. I could have easily been like, that's not what the instructions said, your doc. But when things work, they work, and I will absolutely reward you for that. So let's see. Does anyone need a quick break and we'll do the assignment together? Okay, let's take 5 minutes and then I will do the assignment with you so you can follow along in Illustrator. And if you have any questions, I'll be here. Okay. We'll get started back up. Again, if you would like to open Illustrator and follow along, this is very simple. I just want you to start learning a few basic things, but there is room to have a little creativity and fun with it. I am going to screen share here. And you'll see in the module, assignment 3, typography skills. So what I did here is just copied and pasted this right into Illustrator because we're just going to be following this step by step. And you can start with 8.5 by 11. And you will choose a sans serif font. So I want to know that you know what a sans serif font is. And you will type the word In all uppercase, you'll type the word Bakersfield. Now, the reason I choose Bakersfield is because, and you will start noticing it everywhere you go, is that the kerning on Bakersfield never comes out properly anytime you just flat out type it. And that is because the way the word is, the B and the A and the K naturally have lots of space between their letters versus field with the I-E-L-D with all of these straight letters. So you've got all of the big curved letters at the beginning of this word, followed by all of these straight letters at the end. So a lot of times when you see this, it looks like Bakersfield all scrunched together. So if I was going to say it the way that I think the kerning looks, that's how I think it looks, where it's Bakersfield all scrunched. So this is a great word to practice our kerning skills. And then number 2, kern this type like I showed you in the week 4 lecture. So that would be this lecture right here. How you kern type. Now this is Myriad, it's the default Apple font, and it's a sans serif uppercase. You can absolutely go into your fonts and pick anything sans serif uppercase that you think that speaks to you, and you will see most likely, no matter which font you choose, Bakersfield will look a little bit off, and Field will look squished, and Baker will have more space between it. That's not a sans serif, by the way. I just stopped there. So any sans serif font that you would like to pick. And I really like one of my favorites. Also, I would just like to say fonts have weird names and you read them a lot. So if you mispronounce a font, I don't care. I probably mispronounce a lot of fonts. So if we're talking about fonts next week in our critique or anything like that, don't feel like, oh my gosh, I don't know how to say these. I don't care if you mispronounce it. I don't care if it's wrong or right. It's a bunch of weird names on fonts. So, okay. So to kern font, you want to make sure that it's still a font. You can do this with outlines, but it's not as easy. You actually have to move the letters, the objects, instead of just doing this technique. So when you want to kern something, you click and put that cursor where you want to adjust, and you will use your arrow keys here to move back and forth. See how I'm moving back and forth between those letters? And to adjust that space between the letters, you hold down Option and you move those arrow keys. So now, because I'm holding down Option at the same time, it actually moves the space and adjusts that space when I move my arrow keys. If I take my hand off Option, I just move back and forth with my arrow keys. But if I'm holding Option down, it actually adjusts the space between the letters. So I'm going to tighten up that B and the A and just kind of try to find a more harmonious feel between these letters of Bakersfield. Something that feels more balanced as opposed to just those default settings. I should have left one for comparison. So here's the same font, not kerned yet. You'll see how there's just a lot of space and then it starts to feel a little bit tight. But I actually think I got this a little too tight. It's just a visual. There's really like no way to know perfectly if you're doing this right or wrong. It's just a visual sense that it seems harmonious or it seems too cramped. And a good way to practice this and see if you've got it right is to actually take this word and flip it upside down, and you leave it as type. And then you can do the same thing. It's just, you'll have to do it backwards a little bit because you'll be moving like a different way. But sometimes flipping this upside down and doing the same thing helps you stop seeing the word and see it as shapes instead. So I'm doing the same thing. I just have this reversed upside down. So I have to kind of think differently, like move an opposite way. But turning it, flipping it over can really help you know if you've got that space versus if you see a word, the way our brains work, it's really hard not to read it and just see it as a shape. So flipping it upside down can help you see that more as a shape. And then I see here, I feel like my S has a little bit of a weird gap. So this would be my properly kerned Bakersfield. I could keep staring at it and obsessing over it and wondering if I think it's good, but I think compared to this one here, this looks a lot better. And then kerning could also be, remember I talked about tracking where the space between the letters is wider. So if I was doing tracking and just adding more space in between, it still needs a little bit of kerning there because look how much space is between the B and the A and the K. So you would do the same thing. You click, hold down Option, and just adjust that a little bit so it doesn't have as big of gaps between certain letters. And the word Bakersfield is the perfect practice word for this because it just never defaults quite right because of the way the B and the A and the K fit together at the beginning, and then the way we have these straight letters at the end. So even with more tracking, I feel like this is properly kerned and this one's not. Does that make sense? Does anyone not understand how to do it? How to do the actual moving and the kerning? Okay. Ariane, do you want to open it and actually do it? So just type something. Type Bakersfield. Save yourself a step. And then with your type tool, so make sure you have your word selected. Type Bakersfield. And then click, and then a keyboard Option, and you move your arrows forward and backwards. Now, like I said, you could convert this to outlines, just like I showed you before. Type Create Outlines, and then you could go to Object Ungroup, because when you turn a word to outlines, it automatically groups that word together. So if you want to move individual letters, you have to ungroup it. And you can do the exact same thing by clicking with your selection arrow and then moving this letter around. But you have to then go through and click on each individual letter and do that same thing, versus with your type tool, you just click and you can just move forward and backwards between these letters, holding Option and adjusting that spacing. Is anyone really struggling with how to kern and how to get it to do that? Okay. So that is all you do for step 1 and 2. And then 3, you're going to select a secondary font in a contrasting style, like the script or a serif, and you're going to type California in all lowercase. So I am going to use, I'm going to delete these. And I am going to pick a script font so I can show you an example of how sometimes these letter forms don't align. So if I pick this one, obviously my tracking is set at 200. So of course they're not lining up with each other. So I set that back to 0. And this one did a pretty good job. let me see. I'm going to change my filter to script. I'm going to just click through some of these. This one has a lot of swashes, so that one would need a lot of work. Here's a good example. So some of these connect and some of these don't, but the way that the R and the O break apart leaves that really big gap. So again, you would want to kern that so it comes together.
Professor, are you sharing your screen or?
Yes, it says I'm screen sharing. Can anyone not see it? You can't see it, Lysander?
No, I can't.
You can't? Can anyone else not? I'm going to stop sharing for a minute so I can see you.
I was watching. I was seeing it.
Okay.
Lysander, if she shares again and it still doesn't work, you might need to leave the Zoom call and come back.
Yeah, that might be what's happening. We'll do.
Okay, I'll let you right back in. But again, if I'm ever like it, do not put it past me that I will be talking at you thinking I'm sharing my screen and I'm not. So please don't hesitate if you ever see that and you're like, I don't think she's screen sharing, to stop me, because that would totally be something I would do. So I'm going to screen share again. If you don't see it, go ahead and jump out and come back.
Perfect. I see it now.
Okay, cool. Okay. So do you understand how, were you kind of following along in Illustrator? Do you know how to kern, or do I need to go through that step again?
I'm okay. I'm
Okay.
following. Yeah.
Okay, cool. So, and this will be recorded, and let me look at my calendar. I should be able to post it for you tomorrow. Yes, I will be able to post it for you tomorrow morning. If I don't forget, I'll set myself an alert. Okay, so here's a good example. If I go back to that garland font that I originally picked, because I kerned these to have less of a space, see how the script font does not connect? So if you're, especially if you use free fonts off the internet, sometimes they're just not made well and they will come in like this. So you have to use kerning to adjust script fonts too in order to get them to line up. So, okay, so I've got my lowercase California. I also kerned it. That would be step 4. Make sure your font for California is also kerned and the script fonts connect. So if I were using a serif font, if I come over here, I would also want to make sure this is kerned. And in California, you'll probably see the gaps between the O with the F and the R. And you'd want to kind of fix that spacing. There's also something called a ligature, and it happens a lot between certain letters like F and I. Let me type that and see if it automatically does it. Yeah. So, and it'll connect those automatically, because if I were to have an F, let me add a little space and an I. Now, the minute this font is going to create a ligature, the minute I take that space out. So if I just use kerning to kind of show you, if you have that space that they require between their serifs, the dot of the I runs into the F. So this font automatically creates a ligature for you, which links those two letters together so that the space looks proper and has the right spacing between it. So I'll stick with my script. You can also choose a serif font. And then I want you to make Bakersfield the focal point. So I want it to be large, about 60 point in size. Depending on your font, this might get too large, and you can go even a little bit larger if you feel like that looks good. This font I picked is already at 64, so I'm just going to leave it like that. And this is to practice hierarchy, that fun word that I say every week for all kinds of different reasons. So then California, make that secondary about 50% of the size of Bakersfield and place it below Bakersfield. So you could do this a couple ways. You could just know Bakersfield is 64 point. So I'm going to make this about 30 point. But again, certain fonts just have different characteristics. So even at 64, this script font is a lot smaller than the sans serif font. But I'm still going to make it, I'm just going to change it to about half the size by changing the point size and knowing this is about 60, so this is going to be about 30. Or you can also select this with your selection arrow, go to Object, Transform, and Scale, and you can just reduce it by 50%. Either way you want to do it. And they don't have to be exact. It just has to visually look like Bakersfield has the hierarchy here. So then I want you to open the Glyphs palette that we just talked about for the last assignment. And lots of fonts actually have symbols that come with them. This particular script, I see one in here. But then you can also explore, you know, if you've used like Windows and things, there's fonts called like wingdings and webdings that actually are symbols. But I want you to select a shape. So whether it is something like this, or I pick a different font. Some of these, I forget which one it is. Oh, I think it's Myriad. Let's see, Baskerville has an apple in it. That one has a fun shape. I know one has a heart, but I can't think of which one it is. Oh, and you know what? I still have my filter set to serif. So that's another thing to remember. I do this all the time to myself. I'm like, why won't this font pop up? It's because I have a filter on. So I accidentally do that a lot, just warning you all, if that happens to you and you can't figure out why you can't select a font, you probably have a filter on. Here we go. I think this is the one that has a heart in it. Oh, it doesn't. There's a heart. Oh, because it's kept changing it back. And I think it's doing that. So this is good troubleshooting to help all of you. This particular symbol is not in this typeface. So it doesn't know what to do when I change the font, and it just keeps defaulting back to the same font. So you would want to change a word first, and then look through this palette for this a new shape if you wanted to look for a new shape. And I was wrong. This isn't the one with the heart in it, but there is a font with a heart if you wanted that. But for the speed of the assignment, we have a question in the chat. It doesn't. You can pick any symbol you want. In fact, let's see. But I do want you to pick it from the like a typeface just to get that practice of looking at these symbols. I mean, it could be a $sign if you want it to be a $sign. It can be anything. It can be any symbol that you want that comes in this this palette. So I don't really want you to focus on drawing a symbol. I just want you to find one so you can practice looking through and using these tools. But it can be any of them, and it doesn't have to be one of these two. And I just want you to add it above the word Bakersfield. This looks like it's for a pageant or something. And again, look, keep note of your spacing, and it should be smaller. This is not the main focus. Again, keep the hierarchy at Bakersfield. And then align all of these so they're visually appealing. I am just going to center it, but if you feel like your design is better when it's something like this, then that is your aesthetic choice that you get to make. And then absolutely add color if you want. If you want to just give it a little interest. You can liven it up. And then delete what you don't need. Put it on the page. This color is too bright. It's vibrating a little too much. Let me tone it down. And then, yeah, align it on your page the way you want. And then File, Save As, PDF. And that's it. That is all you're doing. If you are following along, you might even have it done. But I just want you to practice kerning. I want you to practice adjusting the size of type. And I want you just to explore those different elements and just follow those steps. Don't overthink this. It should take you about as long as it just took me to go over it. Shaking your head. And don't obsess over the kerning. As long as you know how to do it, I'm not gonna, it's not gonna be like that website that's like, and then shows you like, this is what's right. Just practice it. Star, did you have your hand up, or was that a long time ago?
No, I just filled it up right now.
Okay.
For the glyph, how do you put the glyph on the page? I don't know why. Like, I guess I
Okay.
get that part. It just didn't catch my attention
Yeah,
when you did it. I don't know.
Let me show you again, because that can be a little bit tricky. You have to have it open. So I just close mine because it gets in my way. And some of you probably by now have done enough assignments that you figured out if you're a really neat, tidy worker, if you just let these float around like recklessly like me. I'm too old to change this habit by now. But I know a lot of, if another designer sits down at my computer, they're like, oh gosh, why do you work like this? So you have to have your palette open and you have to be on your type tool, okay? So see, I'm over here on my toolbar. I have the type tool selected and just click on your artboard. And then just whatever symbol you want over here in this palette, double click it. So you're not clicking and dragging these over. You have to double click it and then it pops over and you're essentially, it's like a keyboard that you're pressing. Double click. Does that work for you now?
Yeah, I did it right now.
Yeah, and then you can, like if you don't want it to be connected to the next thing, just click again to a new spot.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Yeah, so I would say that can be a little tricky. And then knowing how to do the option arrows for kerning can be a little bit tricky. Anybody else?
Professor, for the kerning part, which I know we went over like 3 times, what buttons, because you said, I think you said press option.
Okay.
What 2 buttons are you pressing that are kerning? Like what?
So it's option and then the arrow keys. So let me.
For my keyboard, I have to use the Alt key.
Okay, I was gonna say on.
Okay, I was like, okay, my keyboard doesn't say option, so maybe it's okay. Oh, thank you, whoever said that.
I think that was that Jacob?
Yeah, that was me. I did that too. I had to Google. I had to look it up. I was like, what is that on Windows? And I was like, oh, it's Alt, and kept going.
I'm
Okay.
sorry. I'm Apple, so option and command and control, like they're a little bit different, but yeah, you hold it. So if you're just clicking on, oops, I'm not screen sharing. See, Lysander, I told you, like never hesitate. Don't put it past me. I do that all the time. So if you use your arrow keys and you just move them, it just moves you through. And that's like, you could delete. And then, if you have a typo or something, you re-add that in. If you're holding option, or was it Alt, then it actually moves that spacing around.
So I hold down Alt and then I use my my keyboard keys to move them. Okay, thank you. Now, okay. I was staring at this for a minute and I was like, is it my mouse? Am I just let me YouTube it. Thank you.
Yeah, and I mean, you can always YouTube anything, but I mean, just ask me and I can also tell you. But that's why I also said, if you do convert this to outlines, you can essentially do the same thing just by moving these shapes back and forth. But it's so much easier just to know, like, oh, I can move this on the keyboard. So, any other questions? So you have a lot on your plate this week in terms of like things to check off the list. So you have a discussion board, you have this assignment. Don't overthink it, just it's just practice. So the assignment, again, it's just practice to help you learn these skills. And then the project is where you'll want to focus your creative energy and do something really fun and creative and think of like a face to come up with and how you can make that face out of typographic shapes. And then next week, because this project's a little bit different in terms of critique, it won't really be like last week where we talked about like, is this communicating properly? Like, what are your principles and elements? Why did you make these design choices? We'll still see them because they're fun to see as a group in class. So we'll share them with each other, but it's more of a breezy critique. We just get to show each other, talk about which ones we like and we don't like. But it'll take up a lot less time. And then we'll get into, I think it's color theory. Let me check here. Yeah, next week is color theory, which is really fun. So we'll just kind of go over the project so you can see what everybody did. It's really fun on a super creative project like this to see what the other students came up with. And I've gotten some really interesting ones over the years as far as like what these faces look like. So have fun with it. And yeah, if you have questions about anything, reach out to me. And if you had questions about last week, I know a few of you were struggling with last week's assignment. Stick around, and otherwise you are free to go.
Professor, I have a question.
Mm-hmm.
Am I able to share my screen with you so you
Yeah,
can?
absolutely.
Okay. I was like trying to figure out, but I don't know what to do. I did this last time, sorry. I'm trying to figure out, so this was that I just did.
Yeah, that's looking good.
Thank you. So I know, is it this one? Okay. Because I know that they're uneven, but I don't know how to like get it even with the whole page, if you know what I'm talking about. Is that
okay? Yeah. So in Illustrator, you like what I would do is just make another shape that's the same size as the page and then align all of those and then move it over.
That makes sense. That would be easier. Okay. So so
if you just make a rectangle that's the same width as the page and then just delete it after. Yeah.
Okay. That makes sense. Okay, because as I was trying to figure out, but I couldn't. So
you can put rulers on. So if you hit Command or Control R, it'll add rulers to the edges. And then you can see where like that middle point is. So a lot of times I'll move a guide. And then if you drag from the ruler, it'll give you like a guide that you can use. So I'll put one like in the middle just so I know where my middle is.
Okay. All right. Well, thank you.
You're welcome.
Oh, I am trying to do that ruler thing and I am not figuring that out. So it was Control R.
Mm-hmm. And did it add rulers?
Mm-hmm.
You could also go to probably View and Rulers and then Show Rulers. Yeah. So you can also go to View and scroll down to Rulers and hide.
Okay, I see it.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
And then from those rulers, you can grab, like if you click on your ruler and drag up or down, it'll bring a guide out for you.
Okay, gotcha.
So that can be really helpful too, just to help line up everything on your page.
Mhm. Just. And where was it that you turned it in? That's where I was trying to look through in Canvas.
Okay, so you should be able to go to the assignment.
Which one is it? That's what I'm getting
And
confused at. Because it would be under week 4, but I'm like, it's not the typography skills one.
so it's not project 2. Okay, so let me screen share. You'll have, let me go to student view. So upcoming assignments, it should be there. Let me make sure I have the date set properly, because sometimes.
I think it is the typography, because that's where I found the instructions.
Yeah, it is typography skills. So it is.
Okay. I think I was getting mixed up because it was like the other ones, like the same name. Okay.
Yeah,
Gotcha.
so if you go to the module, it's all listed there, so you get a little, but I just wanted to make sure. Yeah, the dates are set. Sometimes I'll forget and because everything comes into Canvas like from last semester. So sometimes the dates will still be from last semester, and then it doesn't pop up. So, okay. You got it? Awesome. Ariane, you have your hand up.
The homework.
Mm-hmm.
I cannot make it go into the circle.
Want to screen share with me?
Yes. So this is where I was at today. That's as far as I got. Now for this one.
Okay, first thing that's your problem is that you're an illustrator and you need to be an InDesign.
Oh my God. Well, that would be it.
And it'll be so much easier, and you'll be like, oh my gosh, this is so much easier. And that's why we use InDesign.
Okay, so shut this down then.
Yeah, just close that.
Okay, and the other one is going to be an InDesign as well?
The one we did today is an Illustrator.
Okay. I'm not even going to save that because I don't know what I'm doing. So let's see now. Okay, so that's where the problem's at, is the InDesign. And that's through Canvas or through the cloud?
So the files that you downloaded for the assignment, you should get a folder. Now, Melissa also had a problem getting the files. So were you able to download the zip file and then open it? Okay. So the one that says .idml, that's the file extension, open that in InDesign.
I see Adobe. I don't see the InDesign.
You may not, because that's the first time we used it. So
I may not have opened it in the cloud.
Yeah. So you'll have to install the program.
Okay. Can I just get is it possible to just get an extra day on that?
Yeah, that's totally fine.
I'm really struggling with this stuff.
These assignments, like I've said before, are really just like a pass fail. You either do it or you don't, so you don't really get a lot of points docked unless something's just like really off, and then you can fix it. But yeah, you can get more time to do it. It's perfectly fine.
Okay.
Do you need me to show you on my end, or are you comfortable now watching the videos?
No, I'll see it again.
Okay.
With you.
So let me go.
Because it's installing now.
Okay. So InDesign. Oh, look, I still have mine. So this is what it should look like, the Start Here document, when you open it up. And all you'll do in InDesign, you'll also have your folder. Where is my folder? I go to my desktop. So I have my photos for this assignment.
Mhm.
So make sure you know where your files are. That will also be a big step into making this easier or hard for you, is if
Okay.
you know where your files are. So wherever you downloaded that zip file, make sure you know where your source files are. So I walk you through it in that video, but you want to make sure you're in InDesign, and then you take this selection arrow, you just click on that circle and see how it adds a box telling me I've clicked on the circle frame. And this
Okay.
is already set up as a frame. So you can do Command D, Control D, or File, Place. And then in your files, navigate to where you've saved the image that you want to put there. So I'm going to my week 3 folder. In my assignment folder, and then my links. Oh wait, I have a couple folders in design assignment. And then here are the photos. I don't know why I have this repeated so many times, because every time I'm showing the class, I just re-download it and then think, oh, I need to save this. So here's the, I have the Manhattan, I have the ocean, Sedona, whichever one you pick, or if it's your own image, you just need to know where that image is.
Okay.
And then you open it and it automatically imports into that circle. And then you get this other arrow to click on just that. So I get this direct selection arrow and I click on the photograph itself. And now I can scale the photograph up and fill up the whole circle.
Okay.
I know I feel like I make everything look easy, and then you get back and you're like, okay, wait, what do I do? So if you have trouble, once you get that downloaded, if you need to set up some time, we can walk through it together. That's totally fine.
Okay. That sounds good. Thank you.
You're welcome. Melissa.
Yeah, so it's the same assignment. I was able to upload my own picture and also for the big circle one, but I just cannot get the one for the little square, for our sign. I just cannot do that one.
Do you want to show me on your screen so I can see if something weird is happening to the file, or if it's...
Yeah, let me share. Okay, so I'm here.
Mm-hmm.
And then I'm supposed to go file and open, right?
File place.
Oh, file place.
Uh-huh. And you'll want to be clicked on that square. Well, actually, you don't really need to. Just go to file place.
So I'll be here, and where's place?
Right there. Up one, two.
Oh, right here?
Yep.
Okay. And then recent. Oh, I don't think I have it here. Oh, yeah, it's right here. So it should be, I'm pretty sure this one, I think.
So just click somewhere, anywhere. So what you've got going on right now is that you're placing the whole file, and you missed the step where you need to open up this EPS file in Illustrator first. And when you do that, you just pick one and then save a new file. And then you should be able to place it in there much easier.
Okay, so how can I do that?
So jump over to Illustrator. You can just delete that for right now.
This one right here?
Yeah.
Okay.
And then go into Adobe Illustrator. That'll be the new program.
There you go. Right here?
No, but it still looks like you're in InDesign. Oh, you know what? Hit undo for me. I'll take you there an easier way.
Okay, do you want me to stop sharing?
No, just hit Command or Control Z.
Control Z.
One more time.
Oh, I'm doing it.
You must not be clicked on the program. Click in the middle of InDesign right there. Just click somewhere.
On the picture?
Yeah. Okay, now hit Control Z.
Yeah, not working.
Okay, just go back up to File, Place, and drop in the zodiac signs again, or whatever EPS file you want.
Okay. Right here?
Yep.
Okay. And do I just crop it?
I don't see, did it drop in? I don't see it.
Yeah, is it this one, right? Can you see it? Yeah.
I don't
No?
know.
Oh, wait, because I can't see it.
Click one more time. Can I just show you? I was trying to make you do it.
Okay, I'm gonna stop sharing, okay?
Okay. But I'll just show you.
There you go.
Okay, so what you're doing right now is trying to import the entire EPS file. So it comes in like this. So what you actually need to do is import this into Illustrator. So if I'm in Illustrator, I do go to File, Open, which you had originally said. And I open, again, navigate to where my files are saved. Or you can, click and drag them in there. I'll just open the animals. They're the first EPS files I saw. But if you're in InDesign, you can also click on this grouped image and then right click and go up down to edit with and click Adobe Illustrator, and it should open it in Illustrator for you.
Okay, because I think I already got it on Illustrator.
Okay, so once you have it in Illustrator, just pick one and then Control C or File, Edit, Copy, sorry, and then File, New, and paste that into a new document and change the color, and then File, Save As, and just save that as an EPS file. So down here, instead of AI, you'll change it to EPS and save that. And then you'll move back over to InDesign. You'll click on this frame and Command D or File, Place, again, it's the same thing. And then you can drop in that EPS. That wasn't the same file, so I hope that wasn't confusing. Let me go to where. It's this one. And then I open it up. Did you get it?
The only thing that I don't get how to crop it, because I already have it on the, can I share my screen again?
Yeah.
Yeah, let me go. It's right here. I think it's this one. Oh, okay. Okay, so I have it like that. This is going good, right?
Yes.
Okay. And then I click on the image that I want to crop. I have it clicked, and after that, how do I crop it just for that one?
So what you're going to do is copy it and drop it into a new document. So make sure you have the whole, so it came in pieces.
Yeah. Like that.
You can just drag over the whole thing. So, or hold shift down and grab both of them at the same time. There you go. Oh, you had it. So click, yeah, and then hold shift and then click on the outside part too.
Oh, I don't know. Let me see. Oh, I can't.
So don't move it yet, just click. So click, so keep that selected. See how you've got it grabbed with those, with the blue outline?
Yeah.
Hold down shift and then click on the outside piece too, just one click.
With this one?
Yep. So now on your keyboard, hit Control C.
Control C.
Uh-huh. And then go up to File, New. And just hit OK. It's fine that it's
Create or okay.
yeah, create. Sorry.
Okay.
And then hit Command P. Or no, Command V.
Command V.
Yes. No, that was wrong.
Okay.
Command C. No, it is Command V, right?
Command V.
Yeah, it didn't copy it for some reason. So go back over to the zodiac signs. Now hit Command, go up to File, Copy, just to make sure you've got it.
File.
Edit, copy. You got it.
Edit copy.
One over. So I had you go to File, go one over to Edit.
Oh, edit.
Yeah, Copy.
Copy.
Yep. Now go back over to Untitled 2. Click on that. Now go up to Edit, Paste.
Edit, paste. There you go.
We did it.
Okay.
And then change the color of that and then save it.
The color I can change it right here, right?
Yeah, you might need to open up your, if you go over to properties, or you can open up your swatches.
Properties.
Fill, yeah, so open up, go up to window. And then
Color?
Color, yep. Or
Okay.
yeah, and then you can just use the eyedropper and pick something and use those to adjust it.
Okay. Do I have the color now? Oh, okay, I like that one.
And then go to File, Save As.
File.
Save on your
Save on computer?
Yep.
Okay.
And then just name it whatever you can find. Doesn't matter.
I'm just gonna put November.
Okay. And then under where it says Format and it says Adobe Illustrator, change that to EPS.
This one?
Yep.
Okay.
And then save. And then okay. Now go back to InDesign.
And click this square.
Yep.
And it'll be file open now.
Yep. It'll be place.
Place. Okay. Why do I lose it? Where's place? Oh, right here.
It still looks like you're an Illustrator on my end.
Really?
Yeah, I don't see InDesign on your screen. But that could also be, so if you just shared Illustrator when you screen shared, it's not going to show me your InDesign.
Yeah, oh, I'm already on InDesign though.
Okay, so I can't see it, but as long as you can see it.
Okay. So we file place.
Or Command D.
Okay.
Control D. Find that file.
Oh, I cannot find it now. I literally forgot where did I save it. No.
You can go back to Illustrator and resave it somewhere if you need to.
Yeah, that will be much easier because I forgot.
Or just, if you can't search through.
Oh, it should be on documents.
Downloads.
Let me see. It's in documents. It's not here. Okay, I'm just gonna download it again.
So you have it saved in your downloads folder. So when you go back to InDesign, you can search in there.
Okay. InDesign. It's still not popping up.
Can you share your InDesign with me? Because I can't see it. So if you stop screen sharing and then you can re-screen share.
Okay, let me do that. There you go.
Okay, so now.
It'll be file, open,
and then place.
oh, place, okay. Open, file, place. Oh, it should be this one, huh?
Yep.
Oh,
Okay,
there
so
you go. Okay.
there it's just too big, so you just click on it, yep, and scale it down. And
Like that, right?
Yep, you did it.
Okay. Okay, that was so hard.
I'm sorry.
No, it's fine.
But that's two, I'm going to make notes. That's two important things that you taught me that I see how you automatically want to go to open because that makes sense. But in InDesign, you're placing things because these things are saved other places and you're just importing them in. So you're placing them in the document, if that makes sense.
Okay, yeah, that was so helpful. Thank you.
You're welcome. All right. Glad you got it.
I know, I was so stressed.